My name is Barry Loveland. I use the pronouns he, him, his. And I'm here on behalf of the LGBT Center of Central Pennsylvania History Project. Today's date is March 8th, and we're here for an oral history interview with Carol Reisinger. This interview is taking place over Zoom. And Carol, do we have your permission to record the interview today?
Sure.
And we'll have a consent form for you to complete at the end of the interview, and then for you to sign that and send it back to us.
I will do that.
Okay. So this is not quite our normal oral history interview in that we usually do like a complete life story, and I think in this case we're going to be really concentrating on your involvement with Common Roads. So what I'd like to do is start out by asking you to first of all say and spell your full name.
It's Carol, C-A-R-O-L, Reisinger, R-E-I-S-I-N-G-E-R.
Okay, great. And what I'd like to do is maybe have you talk about how you found out about Common Roads and how you came to be involved in the organization.
Well, I was looking for a job, and they had posted the job as the director coordinator for Common Roads, and I looked at it and thought, wow, that would be a great job. I would love it, and applied. And of course, they had a series of interviews, and I interviewed with them, and fortunately for me, got the job. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I loved the people. I loved the kids. It was a great job. And it suited me for a number of reasons. Although this word is not so good used by some people, but I'm very liberal, and I saw a great need to work with these kids. And I've been an educator at a lot of different levels of education all of my life. And I thought the need was so great, especially to work with kids who were not out, and work with educators to teach them. I'd gone through undergraduate masters in counseling psychology, and working with gay kids was never ever mentioned. We never had a class. We never had anything in graduate school or undergraduate that talked about how do you address the issues those kids were having. So I just thought this is a good match.
So when you first started working there with the group, what things did you have in mind that you wanted to do as far as goals?
Well, the Common Roads idea was to have a safe place for kids to be. And so that was our priority, is to work with the kids, make them feel safe, make them feel cared for. But in the back of my mind was also, how do we educate the educators to be in the schools so that those young people could feel safe there too, because they weren't feeling safe in school. So I sort of had a two-pronged thing, is working with the youth so that they felt safe and had things to do and have camaraderie. And the other thing was to work with adults to help them understand these young people and reinforce them in knowing that there's nothing wrong, they're fine. And we started out at St. Michael's Church, Lutheran Church in downtown Harrisburg. Pastor Russ Miller, I don't know if you know Russ, but he was very, very important to us, because here was a spiritual person who felt very strongly that these kids need to feel safe and protected and taken care of. So at the same time, the powers that be in the community were working on a place that we would call our own. And so then we moved from the church to that location.
And where was that location?
I'm racking my brain. On 2nd Street on the corner across from the market. And I'm blanking on the exact address.
Oh, I think it's at actually 3rd Street, 3rd and Verbeck.
Yes, yes.
Broad Street
Yes.
Market.
Yeah.
Yeah, currently
That's where it was.
the Midtown Scholar Bookstore, and I think
Right.
you had offices on the lower level, right?
Yes, we were on the lower level in the basement, but they had it all fixed up. It was very nice. And one of the benefits was walking across the street to the market and get fresh bread. And so, yeah, we stayed there for a while, and that was comfortable. It was, it was nice and gave us plenty of room. And there were some other offices in there with us too.
So talk a little bit about what the group was like at that point when you were working with it, how many kids were coming, and what kind of makeup of the group, and maybe some of the circumstances or stories that kids brought with them.
Lots of stories, very lots of stories. When I became the director, the age group was from 14 to 22. And I thought that as we talked, that became a problem. And so we changed it to 14 to 19. And because 14-year-olds and 22-year-olds weren't necessarily in the same area of their life. So what we did was we reduced the upper level. And so the kids that came were teenagers. Some were active in school. Many of them were very smart and academically did well. We had kids who drove from Lebanon to come every week. And so we had speakers very often. We played games. We did all kinds of things with them. We always participated in the Pride Parade. And so lots of things happened. The kids would talk about how they were bullied and how some people didn't, on the faculty or even school nurses weren't sympathetic at all. So we had lots of those stories, which really impressed on us the real need to find a way to educate counselors, nurses, teachers, administrators. And the result of that was that we wrote a grant and were funded, and that grant was to run a workshop for school counselors. And our idea was if we could educate 20 counselors, then we could have them go back to their schools and they could educate the faculty and the administration. And this is where a good friend comes in. Her name is Marlene Canick. Do you know Marlene? Well, she worked for the Department of Education. And so I called her and we talked about what we wanted to do. So we got the grant, and then she was able to get some more money for us from the Department of Education to do this. And we had a young woman, a young college professor. Her name was Bianca Cody Murphy. She was a doctor of psychology, And I had found an article that she had written on how to develop courses in counseling that would work with LGBT kids in college. So I called and talked to her and told her what we were looking for. And we were looking for a curriculum that we could use to work with school counselors. And so she did produce a wonderful curriculum. And so myself, Marlene, Jennifer Ellis, who is an attorney, we would go out and do the workshops. And Bianca started us out because she would come down and go with us and train us. So we set the first workshop up thinking we would get 20 people and hoped we would get 20 people. We ended up getting 60 people and running it twice. So we had 120 people, which tells you that the counselors in the schools knew there was a need. And so we also fixed it with the Department of Ed that they could get credit for that. And it was an all-day workshop. And so that first workshop, which ended up being 120 people because we ran it twice, then it went all over the place. We went to State College, we went to Lancaster and Lebanon, York, we just did it everywhere. And so we knew that we had done a lot to educate a lot of the counselors. And then we had the administrators ask us to do the same workshop for administrators. And so we did that too. And that it turned out to be successful, at least we think so. We certainly had a lot of response and people coming to it. So that was one of the things that I think really benefited the kids, even though we weren't addressing the kids directly. And so that was good. One of the big things that happened was, I don't know if you remember this, Barry, the movie Jim in Bold. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to think of the guy who produced it. Malcolm Lathan. And he produced it and had it made. And we were able to, and it was the story of a gay young man who ultimately committed suicide. And then it also was an interview with the current one of the young kids that were LGBT and what was going on. And he and his mother talked. And then they followed a group of LGBT kids who were traveling around the country. So that was the movie. And so Malcolm permitted us to have it as a fundraiser. And we were showing it at the forum, if you remember that. And then lo and behold, the Westboro Baptist Church decided they were going to picket that. And so the whole LGBT community just rallied around that. And we had a group who was trained to surround the Westboro Baptist Church, if you remember that. And so they were trained to be silent guardians, kind of. And we had the police, we had police on horseback, we had police on the roofs, if you remember, around. And then we kind of had a big rally, and with speakers and the LGBT flag and so on. And of course, the next morning, it was right in the front page of the paper. And it was certainly a successful fundraiser, and it brought a lot of attention to the needs of these young people. So, you know, as much as we dislike the Westboro Baptist Church, I don't know if we'd have had the reaction we did if we weren't protecting the youth from them. And it just turned out, and a lot of people just said, oh no, not in our city. And, you know, we had lots of people come and be positive for us. And that was great. That was great. I don't know if I answered your question or just really went on.
Yes, yes, you did. And just to follow up on the workshops and so forth that you were doing with the schools, did you find any of the schools start to change their sort of attitudes and so forth? And did any of them start creating like gay straight alliance groups and that sort of thing?
Yes, yes, Cumberland Valley did fairly soon. And then when I left, Michelle Simmons did a lot more work on it and had a lot more GSAs open around the area. But yes, we did. Cumberland Valley, I think another school did. Yeah, I think it did. And I think it made, if nothing else, it made people think something different than they had traditionally thought about. And so, yeah, I think it did change a lot. So.
That's good. And in terms of the activities and so forth that the students or the kids were involved with, you mentioned the Pride Festival.
Yes.
And were there any other special events like that that they were involved with?
We did that, and you know, I have to say that we did different fundraisers with them, and they always worked the fundraisers with us. And we had a big movie night where we had a screen outside. Actually, it was across the river, and we had a lot of people come at that, and the kids would talk and so on. And when we did a lot of those workshops, we actually had a panel of the kids, and they would come to the workshops, and they would tell their stories. And boy, you know, they were real eye openers to the counselors and so on. And these were very articulate young people, and we took them with us. And we said a lot, but in their few words, their words were far more lasting than what we said in the training. So we always brought them with us, and they were dynamite, just dynamite. Yeah, that was part of the things we did, and we did the Pride. And then when Brokeback Mountain came out, remember the movie Brokeback Mountain? Well, we were able to use that as a fundraiser. And so, you know, the kids were participated in talking and that. And then we had, let me think. We had in one of the, and I can't remember if this was at Brokeback Mountain. No, it wasn't. We brought in some of the old timers who were starting the movement way back when in New York, and they were on a panel and talked, and the kids participated in that too. That was a very successful education night. I don't know if you remember that, but that was a very educational night, because they could talk about what happened in the 50s and educated in a whole audience. And and we also reaped the benefits financially from that too. So that was good. Oh, I know what we did. We wrote a play. We got a little bit of money, and we wrote a play called Finding Home. And Jane Scott, who was a English teacher and drama teacher and writer, wrote it. And the kids participated in it, and some of the people that worked with Common Roads participated in it. And we had it at the Little Theater downtown Harrisburg. And we ran that there, and we also ran it at Lebanon Valley College. And that got a great response. And of course, the kids, the young people talked to Jane and worked with her. And so the words and the message were pretty much came from what they had to say. And then, of course, they participated as actors, and they had a great time doing that. And David Payne sang in it, and it was just really wonderful. Yeah. So they participated in that too. So we were busy, Barry, and I have to say, there were times when we were looking at the rent due, and we weren't sure what we were going to do about it. And they had a drag queen show. They would have the drag queens that would get together, have a show, and we would go, not the kids, but we would go, and they would go, this is for Common Roads, and they need the money, and fork it over. And so they saved us many a month. We got money that way. And of course we had our fundraisers, but still, that when things were tough, sometimes we had people who just, did everything they could to help fund us.
That's great. Yeah. What were the dates approximately that you were involved with a group?
I was trying to remember that, and I couldn't remember, because it was okay. We'd moved to Pennsylvania, and I couldn't remember. Okay. I honestly couldn't remember.
That's all right. So you mentioned that you had a board that you worked with.
Yes, we did.
You want to talk a little bit about that?
We had it short. We had a fabulous board, and of course different people came and went on the board while I was there, but Pastor Muller was on the board. Ted Martin was on the board, and these are people I would certainly recommend you interview. Melinda Esch was absolutely pivotal. She's a psychologist and so on, so she always worked with the kids. She was working with them when I came. She was there long before me. Don Blyler, Steve Glassman was very, very active with us. Curtis Fenstermacher, of course, Marlene Canick was there, and she was our liaison to the Department of Ed, and that was fantastic. Jennifer Ellis was an attorney. She's moved out of Harrisburg, but she worked with us and was able to, if we had a question, work with that. But she also came and worked with the kids too. Vince Petrosino, Dr. Petrosino, Chris Person, of course, Frank Pizzoli was always aware and working with us. And then Jim Testerman, and he, at that time, he was with the PSEA. So that was great. Ron Hartzell. And then we were able to put together a program to get an intern. And so we sent out applications for internships with all colleges, and then we put it in the collegiate newspaper that went all over the country. And we had quite a few responses, but we ended up selecting a gal named Kelly Shook, who came from California. And she was also majoring in like videography and film. And so she came and worked with the kids, and she was great. I mean, the year or so that she was there, well, she was there a year, all kinds of things happened. That's when we had Jim and Bold. That's when we had the play. So she recorded that and did a video of it, and was, of course, extremely helpful in working with the kids. and she became responsible for programming for them each week, and she did a great job with that, and was very open and caring with those young people. So that was a good program, that program. And but the board was so amazingly supportive. You know, if we needed something, they figured out ways to get it, and did. And so I'm looking at names here, and most of them I've given you. So anyhow, they were just great.
And after the location at Verbeck and Third,
Yes.
did you move during the time that you were involved?
Yeah, we moved down to the Episcopal Church. They have a building right on Front Street, and not in the church, but a building next to the church. So we had the second floor of that, and that was fun too. Parking was a bear, but we were there for a while, and then that's where they were when I left. They were still there, but they were working at moving later, which they did. Yeah.
Well, Carol, can you think of any other things that you wanted to mention?
Let me look at my notes a second here. Okay. Well, I think I talked about the training that we did, and having the youth go out to the schools to play. No, I think that's pretty much covers it. We were able to write some grants and get some money, but most of that was to just do some things with the youth. And of course, the big one was getting that money to train counselors. And actually, when our grant ran out, the Pennsylvania Department of Education picked it up. So we did have support from the government, really, because they picked it up, and we were able to carry that on a little further. I don't know what's happening now in that field, but we were grateful for that once we ran out of the grant, that the Pennsylvania Department of Education continued to fund that program. And we were able to, it got ingrained enough that over the summer, when the regional education groups were running workshops for credits for teachers, they had us do one, and we did a week of it and had a full complement of teachers coming. Of course, they were getting their credits, but still they invited us to be part of their program. So that was good.
That's great. And in terms of anything that you remember about the kinds of situations that some of these kids came to you in, was it a lot of, did they have a lot of problems with like coming out issues, parents, support, support from parents and support from friends, things like that?
It's funny, it was mixed, Barry, because we had kids there who just wanted to be with other kids, but whose parents were okay, and were supportive. Then we had some who just absolutely were totally afraid that their parents would find out. And I vividly, and I'm not going to give a name, but I vividly remember this youth who finally decided he was going to tell his parents, tell his mother. And boy, she was just almost crazed. And I got phone calls because he finally, we met every Friday night with the kids. And so she was wondering, where's he going? He's just saying he's going with his friends and so on. And I guess he finally felt a lot of pressure that he wanted to tell her. And I will say, we absolutely never, ever pressured kids to come out to parents or anybody else. That we just never would do that. And, but he did. And boy, and that was honestly the last we ever saw of him. And I've often wondered, what happened to him. So we did that. That was one of them. I remember stories of kids, one of our students who locked himself in the bathroom and would only come out between classes when the classes were over to go to his class, because if he went in the halls during regular hall times, he would be so badly bullied that he just wouldn't go to class. So he would lock himself in, he'd lock himself in the bathroom, or he'd find an empty room and lock himself in that. And then after the bell rang, he would scurry to class and come in late. And he was one of the youth that we took with us to workshops, because he could tell a pretty vivid story about if he didn't make it to class late and they caught him, the things that they did to him. And there were 2 kids from that school that came, both becoming extremely successful in their adult life, extremely successful, which just proves that you can, you can overcome some of the hardships that they did have to overcome. But he told that story. And, there are many stories like that, Barry, of the youth. And as I said, some parents were very, very grateful that we existed, because that gave their kids places they could go and feel very comfortable and safe. So I'm still in touch with some of those youth, and they've done well. They've done well. So I think Common Roads has a lot to do with the foresight of the people who developed Common Road and started it and saw the need for Sharon Parther, particularly, that and Linda Esch and some of those people who, Steve Glassman at the very beginning, and you were there at the beginning, so
Right.
That it was a critical need. And even though it takes a little different form now, there's still a critical need, I think.
Well, thank you, Carol.
You're very welcome.
I think you've covered everything I was hoping to cover.